Hello and welcome. The lantern flame gutters in the autumn wind, casting dancing shadows across cobblestone streets slick with recent rain. You stand at the mouth of an alleyway, heart hammering against your ribs like a prisoner demanding freedom, watching a merchant lock his shop for the evening. His fingers fumble with the key, and you notice the heavy coin purse hanging from his belt, swaying with each movement. This is the moment. This is when everything changes. This is when Draeven Blackthorn, a name your mother gave you in hopes of a noble future, becomes something else entirely. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let us travel back through the threads of time to understand how you arrived at this precipice between light and shadow. Chapter 1: Desperation's First Step. 3 years ago, you lived differently. Your father worked the docks in the port city of Ravenmoor, hauling crates and cargo from merchant vessels that arrived from across the Sword Coast. Your mother mended clothes for the wealthy families in the upper districts, her needlework praised for its delicate precision. Your younger sister, Elara, only 8 winters old, attended the local temple school where the clerics taught reading and arithmetic to children whose families could afford the modest tuition. Life was not luxurious, but it was honest. It was simple. It was safe. Then came the plague. The sailors called it the Grey Death, named for the ashen pallor that crept across the skin of those afflicted. It swept through Ravenmoor's dock district like wildfire through dry timber, claiming dozens of lives each week. The temples overflowed with the sick and dying. The priests of Ilmater worked themselves to exhaustion, their healing prayers barely making a dent in the tide of suffering. Your father contracted it while unloading a merchant vessel from the distant lands of Calimshan. Within 3 days, the fever took him. Your mother lasted a week longer, her body already weakened from years of squinting over needlework in poor light. You buried them in the paupers section of the city cemetery, where grave markers consist of simple wooden posts that rot and fall within a year. The priest who presided over the brief ceremony spoke hollow words about the mercy of the gods and the peace of the afterlife. You wanted to scream at him. You wanted to demand why merciful gods would leave an 18-year-old young man alone with an 8-year-old sister and no means of survival. But you said nothing. You simply nodded and led Elara away from the grave. The landlord gave you 1 month. 1 month to produce the rent you owed, or he would evict you both onto the streets. You tried to find work. The docks refused you, claiming they had too many workers already and could afford to be selective. The wealthy families in the upper districts would not hire a young man with no references for domestic service. The merchant guilds required apprenticeship fees you could never afford. Every door closed in your face. Every opportunity vanished like morning mist. You watched Elara grow thinner. The bread you could afford became smaller portions. The milk disappeared from your meals entirely. She never complained, your sister. She simply looked at you with those wide brown eyes, trusting you completely to protect her, to provide for her, to keep her safe in a world that had become suddenly hostile and cold. That trust became a weight heavier than any cargo your father had ever lifted. The first time you stole, your hands shook so badly you nearly dropped the loaf of bread. The baker's shop on Copper Street, run by a rotund man named Aldrich, who always seemed to have flour in his mustache, became your target. You waited until the afternoon rush when Aldrich was overwhelmed with customers. You slipped through the door, grabbed a loaf from the display, and walked out, trying desperately to appear casual. Your heart threatened to explode from your chest, your vision tunneled. But you made it around the corner, and Alara ate bread that night. You told yourself it was temporary. You told yourself you would repay Aldrich someday when fortune smiled upon you again. You told yourself you had no choice, that survival justified the theft. These mantras became your shield against the gnawing guilt that kept you awake at night. The second theft came easier. A coin purse from a drunken sailor who had passed out in an alley near the Broken Anchor Tavern. The man would wake with a headache and assume he had spent his coin on ale. You justified it by noting he was drunk, that he had money to spare for drinking, that his loss was minor compared to your desperation. The third theft, easier still. By the time winter arrived, you had become proficient. You learned the rhythms of the city, the blind spots in merchant awareness, the art of blending into crowds. You kept Alara fed. You paid the landlord. You survived. But something changed in those months. The guilt that once consumed you began to fade, replaced by a cold pragmatism. You started to notice wealth inequality everywhere you looked. The merchants who lived in 3-story homes while families starved in the dock district. The nobles who threw lavish parties while beggars froze in the streets. The temple priests who preached charity but kept their coffers locked tight. Your resentment grew like a poisonous vine, wrapping around your heart. You told yourself they deserved it. The rich, the comfortable, the secure. They had more than they needed while you and Alara scraped by. Taking from them was not theft. It was redistribution. It was justice. It was necessary. The lies we tell ourselves become easier with repetition. Your skills improved. Simple pocket picking evolved into planned burglaries. You learned to climb walls and slip through windows. You studied locks and discovered you had a natural aptitude for manipulating their mechanisms. You began targeting wealthier victims, justifying the escalation by noting you could feed Alara for weeks from a single successful burglary, rather than risking capture multiple times for smaller takes. Then came the night you crossed a line you could never uncross. The merchant's name was Cornelius Blackwood, and he owned half the warehouses in Ravenmore's dock district. You had been watching him for weeks, noting his patterns, learning his schedule. He always walked home alone on 5th day after closing his office, clutching a leather satchel that undoubtedly contained the week's receipts. He was too cheap to hire guards, trusting that his reputation and the city watch would keep him safe. You waited in the alley near his route home, a club in your hand. When he passed, you emerged from the shadows and demanded the satchel. He refused, his face reddening with indignation, spouting something about knowing your family and reporting you to the authorities. Panic surged through you. If he knew your face, Alara would be at risk. Without thinking, you struck him. Cornelius Blackwood fell to the cobblestones. You stood frozen, the club trembling in your grip, watching him collapse. You had not meant it to go this far. You had not meant to harm him so grievously, but intention mattered little. You grabbed the satchel and ran. He survived, you learned later. Cornelius Blackwood lived, though he walked with a limp afterward and spoke with a slur. You told yourself you were relieved, but the truth was more complicated. Part of you, a small dark part that had been growing steadily over the months, felt something troubling. If he had not survived, there would be no witness, no threat to Alara's safety. That thought disturbed you more than the violence itself. You tried to convince yourself you still had a choice. You could stop. You could find honest work somehow. You could return to the person your mother had hoped you would become. But these thoughts rang hollow even as you formed them. The truth was that you had already changed. The desperate young man who had stolen bread to feed his sister had transformed into something harder, colder, more willing to do whatever seemed necessary. You just did not realize how much darker the path ahead would become. Chapter 2: The Hall of Evil's Invitation. The months following the confrontation with Cornelius Blackwood marked a transformation in your criminal career. Word spread through Ravenmoor's underworld about the young thief who had bested a wealthy merchant and lived to tell the tale. Other petty criminals began approaching you with opportunities, partnerships, jobs that required a certain willingness to embrace risk. You accepted some and declined others, always weighing danger against reward, always calculating how to maximize profit while minimizing exposure. Alara never asked where the money came from. Perhaps she did not want to know. Perhaps she convinced herself that you had finally found honest employment. You kept her sheltered from the truth, maintaining the fiction of a legitimate job at the docks. She attended school regularly now, her belly always full, her clothes clean and mended. At night, when you tucked her into bed, she would smile at you with such trust and affection that your heart ached. You were damning yourself for her sake. And some part of you knew there would be no redemption at the end of this road. Winter deepened its grip on Ravenmoor. Ice formed along the harbor's edge. Snow fell in thick curtains that transformed the city into a landscape of white and gray. The poor huddled around fires in barrel drums, burning whatever they could find. The rich retreated into their heated homes, indifferent to the suffering beyond their walls. Your resentment continued to fester. The night everything changed began like any other criminal venture. A fence named Marcus the Weasel, so called for his pointed features and nervous mannerisms, approached you about a job. A minor noble's townhouse in the merchant quarter, currently empty while the family visited their country estate. Simple burglary, minimal risk, substantial reward. You had done a dozen similar jobs. You accepted without hesitation. The townhouse belonged to Lord Aldous Greymark, a pompous man who had inherited his wealth and title from his father. You had seen him once, parading through the market district in silk finery, looking down his nose at the commoners who parted before his retinue. The thought of robbing him brought you satisfaction beyond the monetary gain. You entered through a second-story window, your lockpicks making quick work of the simple mechanism. The house was dark and silent, exactly as Marcus had promised. You moved through the rooms with practiced efficiency, identifying valuables and placing them in your sack. Silver candlesticks, jewelry boxes, a small painting that looked expensive, several ornate daggers that would fetch good prices from collectors. Then you heard voices below. Your blood turned to ice. The family was supposed to be gone for another week. You crept to the stairway and peered down into the entrance hall. Lord Greymark stood there with 2 other men, all 3 removing their cloaks and stamping snow from their boots. They had returned early. You had seconds to decide. Stay hidden and hope they went to bed without discovering you, or flee immediately and risk being seen. You chose flight, moving quickly back toward the window, but your sack caught on a table corner, sending a vase crashing to the floor. Shouts erupted from below. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. You dove through the window, landed in snow-covered shrubs, and ran. Behind you, Lord Greymark's voice bellowed for the city watch. You sprinted through alleys, your breath coming in ragged gasps, the stolen goods weighing you down. You should have dropped the sack. You should have prioritized escape over profit. But greed and pride drove you forward, and those flaws nearly cost you everything. The watch appeared ahead, their lanterns bobbing in the darkness. You turned down a side street, then another, your sense of direction fragmenting in panic. You found yourself in a dead-end alley, walls rising on 3 sides, the watch closing in behind. This was how it ended then. Capture, trial, execution, or a life rotting in Ravenmoor's dungeon. Elara would be alone, sent to an orphanage or worse. All your crimes, all your sacrifices, all for nothing. A door opened in the wall to your left, spilling golden light into the alley. A woman's voice called out, calm and measured. In here, quickly. You did not hesitate. Survival instinct overrode caution. You ducked through the doorway, and the woman shut it behind you, throwing a heavy bolt. The sounds of the watch grew louder, then faded as they ran past the alley entrance. You stood in a narrow hallway lit by wall sconces. The woman who had saved you was middle-aged, dressed in dark robes that seemed to absorb light. Her eyes were the color of coal, and when she smiled, it did not reach those eyes. You run well, she said, but you think poorly. Keeping the stolen goods while being chased, that was foolish. Who are you? You asked, your hand moving instinctively toward the knife at your belt. My name is Marana Shadowmere, and I represent an organization that values people with your particular talents. Come, we should speak somewhere more comfortable. She led you deeper into the building, which you realized was much larger than it appeared from the outside. The architecture seemed wrong somehow. Angles that did not quite align. Hallways that stretched farther than the building's exterior could accommodate. You passed doors that hummed with strange energies and rooms where shadows moved independently of any light source. Finally, you entered a study lined with bookshelves. Marana gestured for you to sit in a leather chair before a fireplace. She poured 2 glasses of wine from a crystal decanter and handed you one. To survival, she said, raising her glass. You drank, the wine rich and complex, better than anything you had tasted. What do you want from me? Direct, I appreciate that. Marana settled into the chair opposite you. I have been watching you, Draeven Blackthorn, watching your progression from desperate thief to something more formidable. You have potential, but you waste it on petty crimes and small thinking. You know my name. I know everything about you. Your parents' deaths, your sister's education, every crime you have committed. I know you tell yourself these actions are necessary, that you have no choice. But we both understand the truth. You have discovered something within yourself. The ability to do what others cannot. The willingness to cross lines when survival demands it. Her words struck uncomfortably close to home. You wanted to deny them, but the lie would not form. I represent an organization called the Hall of Evil, Marana continued. We are a guild, if you will, though that word fails to capture our scope and ambition. We operate in every major city across Faerun, conducting operations that range from subtle manipulation to direct action. We serve those willing to pay for services the legitimate world refuses to provide. You are asking me to join a criminal guild. I am offering you an opportunity to transcend your current limitations. Right now, you are a talented amateur, stealing from minor nobles and living in constant fear of capture. Join us, and you will have resources, training, protection. You will operate with confidence, backed by an organization with centuries of experience and networks that reach into the highest levels of society. You should have refused. You should have walked away from this obvious descent into deeper darkness. But Marana's words awakened something in you, a hunger you had been suppressing. The promise of power, of security, of never having to worry about Alara's safety or your own survival was intoxicating. What would you require of me? You asked. Obedience to the guild's hierarchy. Completion of assignments without question. Discretion in all matters. In exchange, you receive training in skills you have only begun to develop, payment far exceeding what you earn from your current activities, and the backing of the most powerful criminal organization in the realm. And if I refuse? Marana's smile widened slightly. Then you walk out that door, return to your life of petty theft, and eventually make a mistake that lands you in a cell or worse. The choice is yours, Draeven, but choose quickly. The watch is still searching, and my patience has limits. You thought of Alara, of the future you wanted to provide for her. You thought of the nobles and merchants who hoarded wealth while others starved. You thought of the power Marana promised, the freedom from fear and desperation. I accept, you heard yourself say. Marana stood and extended her hand. When you shook it, her grip was cold and firm. Excellent. Welcome to the Hall of Evil, Draeven Blackthorn. Your old life ends tonight. What emerges from this moment will be something far more capable. The Hall of Evil operated from a network of safe houses scattered throughout Ravenmoor. The building where Marana had saved you served as one such location. Its interior spaces expanded through magical means to accommodate dozens of members. You learned that the guild employed wizards, sorcerers, and warlocks who wove enchantments into the very architecture, creating spaces that defied normal physics. Your training began immediately. A weapons master named Krell scarred half-orc with arms like tree trunks, taught you proper combat techniques. You learned that your previous methods were ineffective and crude. Krell showed you precision, technique, and the importance of strategy over brute force. A rogue named Sylvia, slim and graceful as a dancer, refined your stealth and lockpicking abilities. She moved through shadows like smoke, and under her instruction, you learned to do the same. She taught you about pressure plates and trapped locks, about reading a room's layout to identify hidden compartments and secret passages. An operative called Only the Alchemist, whose face remained always hidden behind a ceramic mask, instructed you in the subtle arts of their trade. You learned about compounds that could incapacitate, induce sleep, or cloud judgment. You learned how to apply these substances discreetly, how to plan operations that relied on cunning rather than confrontation. But perhaps most importantly, you learned the guild's philosophy from Marana herself. She conducted classes for new recruits, explaining the Hall of Evil's worldview and operational principles. Society is built on hypocrisy, she lectured one evening, pacing before a dozen new members. The powerful claim moral superiority while exploiting the weak. The wealthy hoard resources and call it earned success. The nobility inherits privilege and calls it divine right. They maintain control through laws they write to benefit themselves, enforced by guards they pay to protect their interests. You listened, absorbing every word. We reject their false morality. We acknowledge the truth they hide. Power belongs to those strong enough to seize it. Wealth flows to those clever enough to acquire it. Morality is a cage designed to keep the masses compliant. We have broken free of that cage, and in doing so, we have achieved a higher understanding. These teachings resonated with the resentment you had been nurturing for months. The guild gave voice and structure to the dark thoughts you had been afraid to fully acknowledge. They transformed your crimes from shameful necessities into acts of rebellion against an unjust system. Your first official assignment came 3 weeks after joining. A merchant who had refused to pay protection money to the guild needed to be taught a lesson. Not eliminated, Marana stressed, but persuaded to reconsider his refusal through unmistakable demonstration. You found the merchant in his shop after closing. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes, probably someone who treated his employees fairly and gave to charity. These thoughts flickered through your mind as you delivered the guild's message, making it clear that continued resistance would bring consequences he could not endure. When you finished, you left him shaken but alive, his understanding of the situation now crystal clear. The merchant paid the protection money. You returned to the Hall of Evil, reported your success, and received your payment. That night, you could not sleep, the merchant's fear echoing in your memory. But Marana's words helped quiet your conscience. The merchant had made a choice. He could have avoided this by complying from the beginning. His distress was his own fault. Chapter 3: The King of Shadows. Over the following months, your reputation within the Hall of Evil grew like a shadow lengthening at sunset. The assignments increased in complexity and scope. A rival guild's operations were disrupted through strategic action. A corrupt city official who had been skimming from the hall's payments was dealt with decisively. A witness to one of the guild's operations disappeared so completely that even their family stopped searching after the first week. You became known for your efficiency, your coldness, your complete lack of hesitation when the moment demanded action. Other guild members whispered your name with a mixture of respect and fear. Marana began assigning you the sensitive operations, the jobs that required someone she could trust absolutely to complete without moral qualms or last-minute conscience. Alara noticed the changes in you, though she could not name what had shifted. You moved differently now, with predatory grace. Your eyes had grown harder, colder, scanning every room for threats and opportunities. When she hugged you, she sometimes pulled back quickly, as if sensing something dangerous beneath your skin. You told yourself you were protecting her through your work, that every dark deed purchased another day of safety and comfort for her. The lie became easier to believe with repetition. The turning point came during an assignment that would reshape your understanding of the world and your place in it. A noble family, the House of Thorngage, had been interfering with the hall's operations in the warehouse district. Lord Thorngage fancied himself a reformer, working with the city watch to crack down on organized crime. He had exposed 3 of the guild's front businesses and gotten 2 high-ranking members arrested. The guild leadership decided to send a message that would resonate throughout Ravenmoor's nobility. Marana summoned you to a meeting room deep within the guild's primary safe house. Around the table sat 5 other operatives, all veterans with extensive experience. She spread a map of the Thorngage estate across the table. Lord Thorngage hosts a dinner party tomorrow evening, she explained. 15 guests, all influential nobles and merchants. The house will be full of witnesses, guards, servants. This is not a subtle operation. This is a demonstration of power. One of the other operatives, a grizzled human named Vex, leaned forward. You want us to strike during the party? That is extremely bold. Exactly. Marana's smile was cold. Lord Thorngage has made himself a symbol of resistance to our operations. We will make him a symbol of what happens to those who resist. Every noble in Ravenmoor will hear about this and reconsider their own positions. The plan was elaborate and ruthless. You would infiltrate the estate during the party, neutralize the security, and ensure that Lord Thorngage's interference ended permanently. The sheer audacity of the operation sent electricity through your veins. This was not a simple intimidation or theft. This was a statement, a public demonstration meant to terrorize the city's elite into submission. You should have been horrified. You should have refused. But instead, you felt excitement, anticipation, even pride at being chosen for such a significant operation. The night of the party, you and the other operatives approached the Thorngage estate from multiple directions. You wore dark clothing enchanted with minor illusion magic to blend with shadows. Your tools were prepared, your mind focused on the task ahead. The estate sprawled across several acres, surrounded by a stone wall that posed little obstacle for trained climbers. You scaled it silently, Dropping into the manicured gardens beyond, through the windows of the main house, you could see the party in full swing. Nobles in elaborate finery, servants circulating with trays of wine and delicacies, musicians playing in a corner. They laughed and danced, completely unaware of what approached through the darkness outside. The guards were dealt with first, quietly and efficiently. You moved through the estate's perimeter, neutralizing obstacles, feeling nothing. They were problems to be solved, not people with families and dreams. This detachment had become second nature, a necessary evolution to function in your new role. When all external security was handled, you and the other operatives converged on the main house. Vex picked the servant's entrance lock. You slipped inside, moving through the kitchen where staff prepared the next course. They were incapacitated swiftly, their presence no longer a concern. Then you entered the dining hall. The conversation died as 6 armed figures emerged from multiple entrances simultaneously. For a moment, frozen in time, the nobles simply stared in incomprehension. They had never imagined such an intrusion could penetrate their privileged world so completely. Lord Thorngage stood, his face reddening. "How dare you? Do you know who I am? I will have you all arrested for this violation." What happened next unfolded with terrible swiftness. The nobles tried to flee, tried to resist, but they were unprepared and defenseless before trained operatives. The operation took less than 10 minutes from breach to completion. When it ended, the Thorngage estate stood silent, a monument to what happened when the powerful challenged the Hall of Evil's authority. You stood among the aftermath, breathing heavily not from exertion, but from the rush of absolute power. You had just participated in an act that would shock the entire city, that would be spoken of in whispered terror for years to come. And you felt nothing but satisfaction. The events at Thorngage Estate had precisely the effect the Guild intended. Ravenmoor's nobility retreated behind reinforced security, terrified that they might be next. Cooperation with the City Watch in investigating Guild activities dropped to nearly nothing. Lord after lord quietly reached accommodations with the Hall of Evil, paying tribute and turning blind eyes to criminal operations in exchange for being left alone. You had helped create that fear. You had become an instrument of terror so effective that the powerful no longer felt safe in their own homes. Marana promoted you to inner circle status, making you one of the Guild's primary operatives. With the promotion came greater responsibilities and darker assignments. You coordinated operations across multiple districts, managed teams of lower-ranking criminals, and reported directly to the Guild's regional masters. But something was changing inside you beyond the simple hardening that comes from repeated darkness. Your worldview was transforming, twisting into a new philosophy that justified and elevated your actions. You began to see patterns everywhere you looked. The city was chaos, 1,000 competing interests creating suffering and instability. The nobles fought amongst themselves for status and power. The merchant guilds engaged in ruthless competition that drove smaller businesses into bankruptcy. The temples preached peace while sitting on hoards of gold. The city watch was corrupt, taking bribes and ignoring crimes based on who paid them best. Everyone pursued their own interests without regard for the greater good. The result was a system that benefited the few while grinding the many into poverty and desperation. You had been a victim of that system, watching your parents die and your sister nearly starve because no one with power cared enough to intervene. The revelation crystallized one night as you sat in your quarters reviewing reports of the guild's various operations. The Hall of Evil was the only organization in Ravenmoor that operated with true efficiency and purpose. Under the guild's shadow government, protection payments were predictable, disputes were settled quickly, and those who cooperated prospered while those who resisted faced consequences. It was harsh, yes, but it was also orderly. What if that order could be expanded? What if instead of operating in the shadows, the guild could rule openly? What if you could eliminate the chaos of competing powers and establish a single authority that brought stability through strength? The thought took root in your mind like a seed in fertile soil. Peace could not emerge from the current system where everyone fought for their own advantage. True peace required a single powerful ruler who could impose order by force and maintain it through unwavering authority, not the weak, ineffectual nobility who inherited power, not the corrupt politicians who served only themselves, but someone who understood the nature of power, who had fought their way up from nothing, who possessed the strength and will to do what was necessary. Someone like you. You began to share these thoughts with other guild members during operations and meetings. Some dismissed your ideas as grandiose fantasy, but others listened with growing interest. They too had noticed the chaos surrounding them, the inefficiency of a world governed by hypocrites and weaklings. Marana observed your evolution with apparent approval. During a private meeting, she asked about your long-term ambitions. I believe the guild should expand its influence, you told her. Not just through fear and control, but through actual governance. We have the organization, the resources, the capability to bring true order to this region. Ambitious, she said, but ambition without power is merely dreaming. What makes you think the guild leadership would support such a radical transformation? Because the current system serves no one well. We operate in shadows because we lack legitimacy, but that forces us to constantly fight for territory and influence. If we emerged as legitimate authority, we could establish stability and prosperity under our control. Everyone benefits, including the common people who suffer most under the current chaos. Marana studied you for a long moment. You have changed considerably from the desperate thief I recruited. That change has made you valuable, but it also makes you dangerous. Be careful that your ambitions do not exceed your position. The warning was clear, but you had already progressed too far down this path to turn back. Your belief in your vision grew stronger with each passing day. You saw yourself not as a criminal, but as a future ruler, someone who would bring order to chaos through whatever means necessary. The darkness, the fear, the consequences, all of it was regrettable but essential. You could not build a better world without first dismantling the corrupt systems that currently governed. Your operations became bolder, more public. You orchestrated a series of strategic strikes against city watch stations, demonstrating the Guild's power to challenge official authority with impunity. You arranged for Guild members to infiltrate merchant guilds and noble houses, expanding the Hall's network of influence into every level of society. You developed protection systems that were so efficient and predictable that businesses actually preferred them to the chaos of random crime. Under your guidance, the Hall of Evil's control over Ravenmoor deepened and strengthened. Other guild members began looking to you for leadership, sometimes even bypassing their direct superiors to seek your approval or advice. Your name was whispered with reverence and fear in equal measure. You had become exactly what the Guild needed: a ruthless, brilliant operative with vision beyond simple criminal profit. But that same vision was leading you toward conflict with the very organization that had created you. Because you no longer saw yourself as serving the Hall of Evil, you saw yourself as preparing to rule it, and through it, rule everything else. Chapter 4: The Throne of Darkness. The summons arrived on a cold autumn evening 2 years after you had joined the Hall of Evil. A messenger delivered a sealed letter bearing the mark of Valdris Nighthillow, the Guild's regional master and the most powerful criminal figure in all of Ravenmoor. You had never met him directly, though his decisions had shaped every aspect of your work within the organization. All orders filtered down through intermediaries like Marana, maintaining a distance that protected him from direct exposure. The letter was brief and commanding. You were to present yourself at the Guild's central stronghold at midnight for an audience with Valdris himself. No explanation, no context, simply the summons and an implied threat if you failed to comply. You arrived early, approaching the stronghold through fog that clung to the streets like grasping fingers. The building appeared unremarkable from outside, a 3-story structure that might house any legitimate business. But you knew the truth. Enchantments woven into every stone expanded the interior into a labyrinth of chambers and corridors where the Guild conducted its most sensitive operations. Guards at the entrance recognized you immediately, stepping aside without challenge. You descended through passages that spiraled deeper into the earth, passing rooms where you glimpsed other Guild members conducting business, counting money, sharpening weapons, planning operations. The air grew colder as you descended, and the lighting dimmed to flickering torches that cast dancing shadows on walls carved from living rock. Finally, you reached the chamber at the stronghold's heart. Double doors of dark, wood-bound with iron, stood before you. The guards here were different from those above, marked with tattoos that identified them as Valdris's personal protectors. They pushed the doors open, and you stepped into the presence of Ravenmoor's true ruler. The chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in shadow overhead. A throne carved from black marble dominated the far end, and upon it sat Valdris Nighthillow. He was older than you expected, perhaps 60 winters, with silver hair pulled back from a face that might have been handsome before scars and cruelty twisted it into something predatory. His eyes were the color of steel, and they fixed on you with an intensity that made your skin prickle. Around the chamber stood a dozen figures, the guild's other senior members. You recognized some from previous operations, but many were strangers, operatives who worked in different districts or specialized in areas outside your expertise. Marana stood to Valdris's right, her expression unreadable. Draeven Blackthorn, Valdris's voice echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant. You have made quite a name for yourself in a remarkably short time. 2 years ago, you were a petty thief stealing bread to feed your sister. Now you coordinate operations across half the city and command the respect of veterans who have served the guild for decades. Impressive. You bowed, keeping your eyes on the floor. I serve the Hall of Evil to the best of my abilities. Indeed, and your abilities are considerable. The Thorngage operation alone would have secured your reputation, but you have done so much more. You have expanded our influence, refined our operations, and demonstrated a level of ruthlessness that many find admirable. He paused, and when he continued, his tone had sharpened. You have also been spreading ideas, talking about transforming the guild from a criminal organization into something more, a legitimate power, a governing force. Is this true? The question hung in the air like a blade. You straightened, meeting Valdris's gaze directly. Yes, I believe the guild's potential extends far beyond its current operations. We have the structure, the resources, and the capability to bring true order to this region. The current system is chaos, competing interests that create suffering and instability. Under unified leadership, we could establish lasting peace through strength. Murmurs rippled through the assembled guild members. Valdris raised a hand, silencing them. Interesting philosophy. Tell me, Draeven, who would provide this unified leadership? Who possesses the vision and strength to rule in the manner you describe? You hesitated only a moment before answering. Someone who understands power's true nature. Someone who has climbed from nothing through strength and will. Someone who recognizes that peace cannot emerge from weakness and compromise, but only from decisive action and absolute authority. Someone like you, perhaps. The challenge in his words was unmistakable. You had reached the moment of truth, the point where either your vision would be validated or your ambitions would end in failure. Around you, hands moved subtly toward weapons. Marana's expression remained neutral, but you saw calculation in her eyes. I believe I could serve in such a capacity. Yes, you said calmly. I have proven my worth through action. I have demonstrated the willingness to do whatever is necessary. And I have a vision for something greater than what currently exists. Valdris leaned forward on his throne. You speak of bringing order to chaos, of establishing peace through strength. But you misunderstand the fundamental nature of our organization. The Hall of Evil exists precisely because of chaos. We thrive on disorder, on the weaknesses of legitimate authority, on the spaces between laws where we can operate freely. Your vision of unified rule would destroy everything that makes us successful. The current approach is limited and unsustainable, you countered, feeling your convictions strengthen. We hide in shadows because we lack legitimacy. We fight constant battles for territory and influence. Our members risk capture and punishment daily. My vision would elevate us beyond these limitations. We would rule openly, without fear, establishing a new order where power and efficiency replace the corrupt incompetence that currently governs. Your vision is naive fantasy, Valdris said, his voice hardening. You imagine yourself a king, bringing order to the realm. But you are merely a talented criminal with delusions of grandeur. The guild does not need transformation. It needs members who understand their place and serve without questioning the established hierarchy. His dismissal ignited rage within you. For 2 years, you had sacrificed everything, descending into darkness, transforming yourself into something monstrous, all while believing your actions served a greater purpose. Now this old man, comfortable on his throne built by others' efforts, dismissed your vision as delusion. The established hierarchy is weak, you said, your voice cold. It relies on fear and violence to maintain control, but lacks the vision to build anything lasting. You have created an organization of impressive scope, but you waste its potential on petty crimes and protection rackets. You could rule this entire region openly, but you hide in darkness because you lack the courage to seize true power. The chamber went silent. No one spoke to Valdris in such terms. No one questioned his authority or called him weak. The other guild members stepped back instinctively, creating space around you. Valdris rose from his throne, and you saw fury in his eyes. You have become arrogant beyond tolerance. I brought you here to remind you of your place within the guild structure. Instead, you reveal yourself as a threat that must be removed. He gestured, and the guards moved forward, weapons drawn. But you had anticipated this possibility. Your training, honed over 2 years of constant danger, guided your movements. The confrontation erupted into chaos. The guards attacked, but years of preparation had sharpened your combat abilities beyond what they expected. You moved with precision born of countless operations, evading strikes and countering with calculated efficiency. The chamber became a whirlwind of motion and conflict. The other guild members watched in stunned silence, frozen between intervention and self-preservation. Some seemed uncertain whether to assist Valdris or simply observe how this challenge would resolve itself. Valdris descended from his throne, drawing a longsword from his belt. Despite his age, he moved with practiced grace, a lifetime of command evident in every step. I should have stopped you when you first showed ambition beyond your station. I allowed you to grow strong because I thought you could be controlled. That was my error. Your error was believing the guild could not evolve beyond its current limitations, you replied, watching him carefully. You built something powerful, but you lack the vision to make it truly great. That is why you must step aside. He attacked with surprising speed, the longsword cutting through air in a deadly arc. You evaded, countering with your own weapon. Steel rang against steel as you exchanged strikes, testing each other's skills and searching for openings. Valdris was skilled, perhaps even masterful in his prime. But age had diminished him, and you had youth and determination on your side. You pressed the attack, driving him back toward the throne, forcing him to defend rather than advance. His breathing grew labored. Perspiration beaded on his forehead. "You cannot win," he said between exchanges. "Even if you defeat me, the guild will never accept you as leader. They will hunt you down and make you pay for this betrayal. They will accept whoever holds power," you said. The final exchange came swiftly. Valdris overextended, and you exploited the opening. Your blade found its mark, and the old master stumbled backward, his weapon falling from his grasp. He collapsed against the steps, leading to his throne, defeated. You stood over him, breathing heavily from exertion and adrenaline. "You were right about one thing," you said quietly. "I am exactly what you created, your greatest success and your ultimate failure." Valdris tried to speak, but no words came. He slumped to the side, still and silent. The master of Ravenmoor's underworld, the man who had ruled through fear and cunning for decades, was finished. You turned to face the assembled guild members, still gripping your weapon. They stared at you with expressions ranging from shock to calculation to something that might have been approval. No one moved. No one spoke. The chamber was silent, except for your heavy breathing. Valdris was short-sighted, you said, your voice carrying through the chamber. He saw the guild as nothing more than a criminal organization, content to hide in shadows and scrape for profit. But we are more than that. We are the only force in this region with true organization and purpose. Under my leadership, we will no longer hide. We will rule openly, establishing order through strength and building something that will endure for generations. You walked to the throne and sat, the marble cold against your back. From this elevated position, you looked down at the guild members who would now serve you or face consequences. I claim leadership of the Hall of Evil by right of conquest. Any who challenge this claim may step forward now. You raised your weapon slightly. Any who accept it will prosper in the new order I will create. The silence stretched for long moments. Then Marana stepped forward and knelt before the throne. I acknowledge Draeven Blackthorn as master of the Hall of Evil and pledge my service to his rule. One by one, the other guild members followed her example. Some knelt readily, perhaps seeing opportunity in the change of leadership. Others moved slowly, reluctantly, but they knelt nonetheless. Within minutes, every person in the chamber had submitted to your authority. You had achieved what seemed impossible just hours before. Through will and determination, you had seized control of Ravenmoor's most powerful criminal organization. The path from desperate thief to dark lord was complete. As you sat on the throne, the chamber settling into an uneasy new order, you felt no triumph or satisfaction. Only cold certainty that this was merely the beginning. The guild was yours now, and through it, you would reshape the world according to your vision. Peace through strength, order through fear, stability through absolute power. You had become exactly what you believed the world needed. You had become the King of Shadows, master of all darkness in Ravenmoor. Chapter 5: The Bard's Lament. The weeks following your ascension passed, in a blur of consolidation and expansion. You moved swiftly to establish absolute authority over the Hall of Evil, removing potential rivals and rewarding those who demonstrated loyalty. The guild's operations continued without interruption, though now every decision flowed through you. Every operation bore your approval. Every success and failure reflected on your leadership. Alara visited less frequently now. She was 15 winters old, studying at a prestigious academy you had purchased her admission into with ill-gotten gains. When she did come to your estate, a sprawling manor house you had claimed from a noble family that mysteriously vanished, she looked at you with eyes that held questions she was afraid to ask. The brother she had trusted completely was gone, replaced by someone she no longer recognized. You told yourself her distance was necessary, that keeping her separate from your work protected her innocence. But part of you knew the truth. She was pulling away because some instinct warned her that the person wearing her brother's face had become something she could not comprehend. Your transformation into the master of the Hall of Evil brought changes beyond simple authority over criminal operations. The guild's resources became yours to command. Assassins, thieves, smugglers, information brokers, corrupted officials, all answered to your will. You reshaped the organization according to your vision, moving beyond simple profit toward genuine control of Ravenmoor's political and economic systems. The City Watch became your puppets, their captains bought or blackmailed into compliance. The merchant guilds paid tribute not out of fear alone, but because your protection systems were more reliable than legitimate law enforcement. Even the nobility, once targets of your operations, began seeking accommodation with the new power that ruled from shadows. You granted audiences in the hall's stronghold, listening to their requests and demands, dispensing favor or punishment as suited your purposes. You were building an empire just as you had envisioned. Order was emerging from chaos under your iron rule. The streets grew safer as rival criminal organizations were absorbed or destroyed. Disputes were settled quickly and decisively by guild arbiters. Business flourished under the predictable structure you imposed. Some even whispered that life had improved under your shadow governance, that the common people suffered less than they had under the corrupt nobility's incompetent rule. You told yourself this validated everything. The darkness, the ruthlessness, the complete corruption of your soul, all of it had been necessary to achieve this greater good. You were the strong ruler who could impose peace through power, exactly as your philosophy demanded. But late at night, alone in your manor, you sometimes caught glimpses of the person you had been. The desperate young man who had stolen bread to feed his sister. The terrified thief who had fled through alleys with the City Watch pursuing him. The lost soul standing in that chamber, having just claimed power through force. These ghosts haunted the edges of your consciousness, whispering that you had not brought order to chaos, but had simply become chaos's newest incarnation. You silenced these doubts with wine and work, drowning reflection in endless activity. There were always more operations to plan, more obstacles to remove, more territory to claim. The Hall of Evil's influence spread beyond Ravenmoor into neighboring cities and towns. Your network of informants and operatives grew to hundreds, then thousands. You became the spider at the center of a web that stretched across the entire region. Power accumulated around you like snow in a blizzard, beautiful and cold and smothering. You wielded it without hesitation or mercy, crushing anyone who opposed your will. Rebellious guild members found themselves reassigned or disappeared. Rival organizations were dismantled so completely that even their names were forgotten. Officials who refused corruption were replaced by those more amenable to your rule. You had become exactly what you had once despised: the powerful figure exploiting the weak, the tyrant maintaining control through fear, the corrupt authority justifying atrocities as necessary. But you could no longer see this truth. The darkness had consumed you so completely that you perceived yourself as righteous, your rule as beneficial, your vision as enlightened. This blindness would prove dangerous. One evening, 3 months after claiming the throne, you attended a gathering at one of Ravenmoor's remaining independent taverns. The Singing Dragon catered to artists and performers, maintaining neutrality in the city's power struggles through careful diplomacy and generous payments to all sides. You went there occasionally to observe the common people, to remind yourself what your rule was supposedly protecting. The tavern was crowded, filled with smoke and laughter, and the smell of roasted meat. A fire crackled in the hearth. Patrons drank and talked and enjoyed brief respite from their struggles. On a small stage in the corner, performers entertained the crowd. Jugglers and comedians, storytellers and musicians, each taking their turn to earn coins thrown by appreciative audiences. Then an elven bard took the stage. She was ancient, her silver hair flowing past her waist, her face marked with lines that spoke of centuries witnessed. Elves could live for hundreds of years, and this one had clearly seen the rise and fall of many powers. She carried a lute of dark wood inlaid with silver, and when she plucked the strings, the sound cut through the tavern's noise like a blade through silk. The crowd quieted, drawn by something in her music that transcended simple entertainment. You watched from your corner table, flanked by bodyguards who scanned the room constantly for threats. The elf's voice rose, clear and haunting, singing in common, but with the melodic quality of elvish poetry woven through each phrase. O soul seized by the shadow's hand, living where light fears to stand, playing darkness like a game, dancing with the blackest flame. Rising through the endless night, climbing toward that terrible height, at the pinnacle of Shadow's throne. He sits now, cold and alone. The new dark emperor he became, wearing power like a name. His smile speaks of victory, of conquered foes and mastery. But what the conqueror cannot see, blind to his own destiny, behind the throne where he now sits, where shadow deepens and darkness spits, others hunger for his crown, waiting for his fall, his drown, with eyes as sharp as any blade, planning how his power will fade. They thirst for blood upon their tongue, watching from shadows old and young. The cycle turns, as it must be, today's dark king, tomorrow's memory. The song ended, the final notes hanging in the air like smoke. Silence gripped the tavern. Then, slowly, nervously, patrons began to applaud. But many glanced toward your corner table, recognizing the song's subject, fearing your reaction. You sat frozen, the bard's words echoing in your mind. She had told your story with perfect accuracy, from desperate beginning to dark ascension. But more than that, she had revealed the truth you had been ignoring. You were not the culmination of some grand vision. You were simply another player in an endless cycle of violence and betrayal. Today's conqueror, tomorrow's forgotten name, the throne you had claimed through force, would be claimed from you the same way, by someone stronger or cleverer, or simply more ruthless. The bard looked directly at you across the crowded room. Her eyes, ancient and knowing, held neither judgment nor sympathy. She simply observed, a witness to history repeating itself endlessly. She had seen this story play out countless times across centuries. You were not unique or special. You were merely the latest iteration of an old, old tale. Your bodyguards waited for your signal, hands on weapons, ready to silence the bard for her insolence. One word from you, and she would be removed before taking another breath. But you raised a hand, staying their violence. Something in her song had penetrated the armor of self-justification you had built around your conscience. The bard bowed slightly, acknowledging your restraint, then stepped off the stage and disappeared into the crowd. You never saw her again, though her song haunted you in the days and weeks that followed. You began to notice things you had been blind to before. The way Marana's eyes tracked you during meetings, calculating and cold. The whispered conversations that stopped when you entered rooms. The ambitious young operatives who reminded you of yourself 2 years ago, hungry and ruthless, and convinced of their own destiny. The cycle the bard had sung about was already in motion, somewhere in your organization. Perhaps multiple someones were preparing to challenge your rule just as you had challenged Valdris. This realization should have terrified you, but instead, it awakened something that might have been your last shred of humanity. You thought of your parents, who had lived honest lives and died meaningless deaths. You thought of Alara, growing up in the shadow of your dark empire, learning to fear and resent the brother who had once been her protector. You thought of the hundreds of people whose lives you had destroyed, the thousands of existences you had altered, all in service of a vision that was ultimately no different from what had come before. You had brought order to chaos, yes, but it was the order of the grave, peace through terror, stability built on foundations of suffering. And eventually, inevitably, someone would tear it all down and build their own dark empire on the ruins of yours. The cycle would continue forever, unless someone chose to break it. But you had gone too far, descended too deep, become too thoroughly corrupted to be that someone. The desperate thief who had stolen bread to feed his sister was dead, destroyed by the choices you had made and the darkness you had embraced. In his place sat the Dark Emperor of Ravenmoor, master of the Hall of Evil, ruler of shadows and secrets. You sat on your throne in the guild's stronghold, exactly as Valdris had before you, wielding absolute power and feeling utterly empty. Behind you In the shadows you could not see, hungry eyes watched and waited for their moment. The bard's song had been prophecy and history simultaneously, the eternal truth of power's corruption and downfall. You had climbed to the pinnacle of darkness and found nothing there but the certainty of your own eventual fall. And somewhere, deep in what remained of your soul, you knew you deserved exactly that fate. The only question was how long until the next challenger emerged, and whether the person who eventually replaced you would learn anything from your example, or simply repeat the cycle once more. If you enjoyed diving deep into this dark tale of corruption and ambition, please like and subscribe to Lord D&D. Your support helps me continue exploring the shadowy corners of fantasy lore and brings these stories to life. Until next time, may your own paths be guided by wiser choices than Draeven's.